I think I'm going to make this one on comic book history. I have a lot of interest in comic book collecting. I was a charter member of comic book collecting in the Seattle area, and I would say predated Overstreet Price Guide, but maybe contemporary with it. I bought number three of Overstreet Price Guide. It was my first price guide, but people I knew had bought the first one. Comic book collecting was a lot more fun before the price guide and greed set in. But we would, on a Sunday, we'd meet at somebody's house, like Don Wilson was a major com- leader in the comic book collecting in Seattle, and barter. You didn't have a price guide in those days. So, I'll give you two of these for one of those. It was a lot of fun. And then when the comic conventions era started up, we were the ones that did them. And I was a comic book dealer. I would little put an ad in Little Nickel, cash for comics, and that's how Don Wilson and I met because he was doing the same thing. Only I was a customer of his too because he wouldn't pay more than a few pennies for a comic book, whereas I was willing to pay like 10 or 15 cents. And and so he would sell to me. And one particular thing that stands out in my mind was that he offered me an X-Men #1 for $2, and I didn't take it because it had a rip thing in the front cover. And here's okay. Let's start off this playlist of comic book history. Did you know that originally the X-Men were like Marvel's lamest superheroes? It's true. True. So yeah, I wasn't too at that time. I wasn't too hot about X-Men #1. Um, I mean, it even got to the point where rather they considered discontinuing the series, but what they did is they tended to go into like annual size, like 25-cent comic books that were reprints. So that's really cheap for them, right? They don't have to buy the content again; they already own it. So they just repackaged reprints and put them out on the stands, and that's the way X-Men survived as a comic book series till the late '70s when Wolverine and the new X-Men came in, and some really talented young artists. There's some really valuable comics around there, and they're particularly valuable. We're talking comic book history, so I might as well get into details. The first few new X-Men are particularly valuable because, like I was saying, X-Men were lame. X-Men were lame. Nobody wanted to read X-Men. They had these drab, boring uniforms and everything, right? So when the new X-Men first came out, it took the market by surprise. Marvel fans hadn't caught on yet. It takes a few issues when these things happen for people to say, "Hey, this is pretty damn good. I'm going to start buying this off the stands every month. I can't get enough of Wolverine. I can't get enough of whoever the other new X-Men are and stuff, right?" Um, and then, so those other ones aren't as valuable because now people were buying it. Now there's supply for the demand. Um, yeah, you see that happen. And I'm very interested in comic book publishing as an entrepreneur and as a history of entrepreneurship. Comic book publishing is way cool, way powerful. I will mention here, you think comic book publishing is trivial or for kids or whatever? There are or were, when I last looked, people listed in the Forbes 400, and I won't explain what that is if you don't understand it. But it's the richest people, 400 richest people in America is what it's supposed to be. And there's some comic book publishers on there, like the guy that's behind Archie. Big money, big money. Um, kind of like cartoons. There's big money in cartoons. Hanna-Barbera on there, and yeah, a lot of big fortunes have been. Has anyone ever heard of Disney? You want to be. I used to have a slogan I created up on my wall years ago. How'd it go? Something like, well, the gist of it was you want to be publishing or doing productions. Because if you pull it off, it'll blow away any wage slave level pay you can get. And if you can't afford to outsource, if you can't afford to buy the content, like the original Superman story was bought from a couple of teenage kids. A lot of youngsters got their start in comic books because publishers wanted to get into comic books. There was huge money in comic books, but they didn't want to pay a lot. And so teenagers, they didn't have to pay a lot, right? So no doubt Simon Schuster uh, did Superman for fun and probably found it pretty cool that, hey, somebody will pay them something for it. And the rest is history. Literally, maybe we'll get into the history of Superman sometime. But if we do that, we first have to get into the history of Captain Marvel. If you don't know what I'm talking about, stay tuned. I'll make more videos if people care. Yeah. So where was I in the computing of computing the history of comic books? Well, comic books were an innovation of the 30s. Now, comics started a little bit before the 1900s, and I've got a wonderful story to relate sometime where I found a bubblegum card, Yellow Kid bubblegum card in like an 1896 book. Okay, I'll relate it. Let's start at the beginning. Yellow Kid, who was the first big hit. And I found this bubblegum card in an 1896 uh, book that hadn't been touched in years, so that gives it authority. And the book, I did a lot of book reselling on eBay and Amazon and stuff. You use book reseller, and you find interesting things in the books as you're looking through them to get the condition and get them ready for sale. Um, this was one of the oddest. A pristine mint bubblegum card from the late 1800s that had survived to, well, like the 70s at least. Yeah, I think I sold it to Rod Dyke for $10 because I wrecked the condition. On my trip to Pike Place Market, I folded it in two unwittingly and put it in my back pocket, so I only got like $10 from it, which still a bargain for him. I mean, it's a priceless item. You you show me that you have a Yellow Kid bubblegum card from the late 1800s, and I'll be impressed. Priceless, not just rare. But, it's part of being a dealer and an entrepreneur and stuff. If you're not willing to sell things to come up with money to buy other things that are more valuable to you, then you might as well go home. Wait a second. I am home. Hey, what are you doing in my home? Did I invite you? Yeah, I did, didn't I? Oh, God. Okay. Oh, goddess, I mean. So, I'm not Wiccan. I really, honest. I'm eclectic. I'm a symbiotic eclectic. Okay, let's not get into that here. So, so that was the start around 1900, and that was the comic strip. Yellow Kid was one of the first, most popular ones. Fast forward a couple of decades, and you get into the 30s. Oh, sure. Well, the 30s actually is when things started out. And typically, publishers were already publishers of other things, or they had flagship uh, product lines that were really what they are about. And they're just trying out this innovation of comic books. So the first comic books, like 1930, and I've got some of these coverless and stuff. But so what? I got them. They're cool. And you never read them because who cares about the comic strips from the 30s, right? But from 35 to 38, mostly the comic books were comic strip reprints. They just bundle a whole bunch of comic books of a particular series and put them in a comic book and ballyhoo how all funnies, all this or that, and then of course, as that market got saturated, they started experimenting with all new features and all new stories and this kind of stuff. Um, Again, marketing, you want to say as much of the good stuff and what your customers are going to consider a feature or a value, and avoid saying any of the stuff that might keep them from buying or bad stuff or gray areas. Um, that's marketing in a nutshell. Sales is from Zig Ziglar is from that the customer when they come in to buy, if they're going to buy, there's three or four steps of the buying process too, as well as like the sales funnel and all these techniques. But when they come in, they have a price in mind. They're willing to pay that. If the price is that or less, that doesn't need a salesperson. The sale's made. The job of the salesperson is okay, they're willing to pay this. They see the value in it for that. But the price is this. And of course, retailers and such are always trying to push the envelope of what price they can get away with. You don't want to have it so low that you're selling all you can make. You price it enough that, yeah, they will all sell within a reasonable amount of time or enough of them. And that's a whole nother entrepreneur area to get into, which I won't say right now. Stay tuned. Um, so that's what you got to sell it at. That's your job as a salesman. Maybe you've got some tricks and stuff like you're authorized to give a 10% discount or something, so the mark or whatever thinks, oh wow, man, I negotiated something, when that's really the price you wanted all along, right? A lot of tricks like that. Smoke and mirrors. The world, ignorance and apathy, smoke and mirrors. Money is nothing. It's just fuel. Okay. Start sharing some of my philosophy with you. So that's the job of a salesperson, to educate, ideally, not to scam them, not to grift them, but to educate the customer to understand the value difference, the price difference. There's actually value there more than they think. What about this? How about this? Did you know that this? And educate the customer on why they should pay the price. Wow, that's fertile ground. That's fraught with something. 14 minutes. Ah, man, I'm making these too long. I want to keep them like 15 minutes or less. And post, 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 post. That's what I'm doing today. So it is January 14th, 2024, midish dayish. Nice, wonderful day out, but cold. And I'm making videos and posting them like mad. One step beyond. And here we go.